The laughter started before she even finished the sentence. "He's useless to me these days," she said casually as she passed the bowl of roasted vegetables to her cousin. The table erupted. Her friends leaned in, hands covering grins. Her aunt let out a sharp cackle, followed by the clink of wine glasses. She looked right at me when she said it, eyes wide like she was waiting for me to roll with the joke. I did. I smiled. Tight. Practiced. Someone murmured something about husbands and their half-finished projects. Another voice followed, talking about her own partner who couldn't manage to change a tire without Googling it first. The topic shifted. They moved on. My smile didn't. I watched her slide back into conversation like she hadn't just gut-punched me in front of a table full of people who never noticed what she'd taken out of me. She was glowing under the kitchen lights, confident, animated, almost flirtatious in the way she grinned and touched her wine glass after every story. I couldn't stop replaying her words. "He's useless to me these days. Not clumsy. Not forgetful. Not stressed. Useless." The rest of the evening blurred. I caught phrases, laughed in the right places, passed the dessert plate when it came around. She leaned her shoulder into mine once, maybe twice, when something particularly funny was said. I didn't pull away. That would have been a scene. And I didn't do scenes. Instead, I made myself still. Still while they joked. Still while she laughed. Still while someone asked how the house projects were going and she said, "Oh, I just started doing them myself." More laughter. Still while I tasted her tone in my throat and realized it wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. It was just the first time it landed with an audience. After dinner, I helped clear the table. Mechanically. She told her friends to relax, that we'd take care of it. As she rinsed plates, she told me it was just teasing. Said I was too sensitive. But her eyes never met mine. They never do when she says things she knows cut. When the last guest left, I stayed in the kitchen alone, wiping the countertop in slow circles, listening to her footsteps fade into the bedroom. The house was quiet again. But my head wasn't. Her voice, that sentence, had lodged itself somewhere deep, like a shard I couldn't pull out without making it worse. That night, she would sleep easy. I wouldn't. She lay beside me with her back turned, thumb flicking through her phone, screen glow reflecting against the wall. The silence wasn't new, but it had changed shape. It wasn't comfortable or neutral anymore. It was something colder, like she was already somewhere else in her mind, and I was just the outline of someone she used to need. I stared at the ceiling. Her words looped quietly inside me. Not the joke, not the delivery, but the casual precision of it. "He's useless to me these days." There was no trace of affection in it, no soft edge to dull the blade. It wasn't a jab for fun. It was a message. And she didn't take it back. Not when we cleared the dishes. Not when we turned off the lights. Not now, lying less than 2 feet apart. A few times, I thought about asking her. Just a calm, direct, "What did you mean by that?" But I already knew what she'd say. Something minimizing, dismissive. Maybe a sigh, a roll of her eyes, some line about how everyone else laughed. No point opening a door just to be told it's all in my head. I listened to the soft clicks of her fingernails on the screen. She giggled once, a short, reflexive sound. Probably something on her feed. Not me. Not us. Her body barely moved. Not a single glance in my direction. If she noticed my silence, she didn't care. If she cared, she didn't show it. At one point I rolled to face her back. My hand almost reached for her shoulder, just to feel some kind of contact. But I stopped myself. It wasn't pride. It wasn't resentment. It was something harder to define. A kind of clarity, maybe. A quiet awareness that this wasn't just a bad night. This was the shape of things now. I remembered the way she used to lean into me at night. The way she'd tuck her feet behind my calves in the winter, murmuring something about stealing my warmth. The way she'd whisper dumb thoughts right as she was falling asleep, half dream, half sincere, and expect me to remember them in the morning. But those versions of her had drifted somewhere I couldn't follow. Now she fell asleep to the soft glow of curated strangers. No goodnight. No turning toward me. Just a dim light in the dark and the faint smell of her lotion, fading. I lay awake for hours, not angry, not emotional, just listening to the echo of her voice from earlier, not the words, but the way she said them. The ease, the certainty, like she'd rehearsed it. And I wondered when exactly she'd stop seeing me at all. I didn't mention it the next morning. Didn't ask if she remembered what she said. Didn't suggest we talk about it. I just made my coffee, checked my calendar, and left the dishes in the sink. She noticed. Her eyes lingered on the cup I didn't rinse. She hesitated when she reached for the sponge, like waiting for me to do it out of habit. I didn't. I walked past her, kissed her forehead, reflex more than affection, and left for the day. No confrontation. No lecture. Just subtraction. It started small. The tire light blinked on her dashboard. Normally, I'd take the car out that night, check pressure, reset the sensor. I didn't. She asked me about it once. I told her I hadn't noticed. I had. I just wasn't available in that way anymore. Then the oil change reminder came. She muttered something about needing to get it done. I nodded. That was all. She missed her dental appointment the following week. I used to be the one who managed both our calendars, synced everything, sent reminders, even booked the Uber if she was running late. That morning I said nothing. When she realized, she muttered something sharp under her breath, grabbed her phone, and paced around the living room trying to reschedule. I sat at the table, working on my laptop, not offering a solution, not pointing out the reminder she'd swiped away 3 times. She looked at me like she expected a reaction. I gave her a brief glance, said, "You'll get it sorted," and turned back to the screen. There was no malice in it. I wasn't playing games or trying to teach her a lesson. I was just removing myself from the places she told me I didn't matter. One roll at a time. One tiny lifeline cut each day. She didn't ask why. Not yet. But I saw her posture shift over the next few days. Her movements were quicker, less assured. She snapped more often. At the dog, at the mail, at the laundry basket that overflowed when I stopped running the machine every other day. She hadn't realized how many quiet things I did. How many systems I held together. Silently, invisibly. She thought I was passive. I was foundational. Now, the cracks were showing. And I wasn't patching them. At night, she still scrolled. I still stayed silent. Her body still curved away from mine, like the bed wasn't big enough to hold us both. Only now, I no longer reached for her. I was already leaving. Not physically, not yet. But I'd stopped carrying weight that didn't belong to me. And that shift, though small, was irreversible. She didn't see it yet, but she would. It was the groceries that finally made her pause. The fridge door swung open one Thursday night and just hung there, her silhouette lit by the pale light of emptiness. A few containers, half a lemon, mustard, the basics, things I kept stocked without thinking. Now, it was all missing. I'd stopped going to the store 2 weeks ago. She hadn't noticed until the shelves stared back at her. I didn't look up from the couch. She stood there a while, then closed it harder than necessary. The thud echoed through the kitchen. "You said you were going to stop by the store," she muttered. I sipped my water, still watching the screen. "Did I?" She didn't respond. Not directly. She pulled open a drawer, rummaged for takeout menus, slammed it shut again. Eventually, she ordered something. Ate it standing at the counter, scrolling through her phone, pretending she wasn't annoyed. The next morning, she couldn't find her dry cleaning. She asked if I'd picked it up. I hadn't. I always used to. But that was before I started taking her words at face value. Her voice cracked a little when she asked, "Didn't you say you'd get it yesterday?" I met her eyes, calm and clear. "I thought I was useless." She blinked. Once. Twice. Then forced a chuckle, that performative laugh she used when she didn't want to admit she was off balance. "Don't be dramatic." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being accurate. Laundry piled up next. Not mine. I kept my rhythm, folded my shirts, ironed what needed ironing. But her side of the hamper kept growing. It spilled out across the floor by the end of the week. I walked past it each day without comment. Saturday morning, she overslept. Missed a yoga class she usually never forgot. Her alarm had gone off. I heard it, but I didn't wake her. I used to. Always had. One gentle nudge, one whispered, "Hey, you'll be late," and she'd stir. Not this time. She woke with a start, checked the time, cursed under her breath. "You didn't wake me," she said as she tugged her sweater over her head. "You didn't ask me to," I replied without looking up from the sink. The house had become a mirror. Everything she dropped, I let fall. Everything she forgot, I let stay forgotten. Not out of spite. Not to hurt her. But to finally let her experience the weight I'd carried for years without thanks or acknowledgement. She used to say I was reliable. Then I was invisible. Then I was useless. Now she was beginning to see what the absence of useless really felt like. It started unraveling faster than I expected. Monday morning, she left her laptop charger at home. She called me from her office, irritated but trying to sound casual. "Hey, any chance you could swing by and drop it off?" Her voice was breezy, like this was just one of those little favors I always handled without complaint. I looked at the charger. It sat where she left it, beside the chair, coiled neatly. I thought about how many of my workdays I'd bent around her disorganization, how many meetings I'd rescheduled just to deliver what she forgot. This time, I told her I had a full calendar. I'd try later, but made no promises. She hesitated before replying. "Oh, okay. No problem." By the end of the day, she'd borrowed someone else's. She came home distracted, tense. I didn't ask how her day went. Later that week, she double-booked herself. A work commitment clashed with a dinner reservation she'd made with friends. She blamed her calendar. "I thought you were sinking these still." I wasn't. I'd stopped weeks ago. That job had once been mine, quietly and consistently. But I wasn't managing her life anymore. "You said you'd remind me about Friday," she insisted. I stirred my tea, not meeting her gaze. "I didn't have that on my list." She stared at me. "Why not?" I set the spoon down slowly. "Because I stopped keeping track of the things I'm apparently no good at." It landed. Not loud, not cruel, but clear. She looked away, pressed her lips together, then nodded like she was trying not to show how hard it hit. The next morning, she forgot her lunch in the fridge. Came home that evening with a fast food bag and a headache. Said the afternoon had been brutal. I nodded, offered her a glass of water. She took it without saying thanks. By now, the pattern was solid. She was missing things, forgetting things, dropping threads. And for the first time, they stayed dropped. She didn't spiral. Not yet, but the edge in her voice was sharper. The silences between us were longer. She was trying to hold it together, but the scaffolding she didn't know I'd built around her life had been slowly dismantled. And I was there, the same as ever, but different. Present, but not participating. Watching, but not intervening. It wasn't punishment. It was proof of how much I had mattered, how deeply I'd been embedded into her daily rhythm, and how carelessly she dismissed it with one joke, one sentence, spoken over wine and laughter like it meant nothing. Now, the consequences were showing, quietly, accumulating, and I said nothing. She hadn't apologized, so I hadn't returned. She cracked over a misplaced envelope. It was a Friday evening, and I was in the garage, fixing the hinge on an old cabinet I planned to sell. I heard the front door open, close harder than it needed to. Her heels echoed across the floor, fast and uneven. She called out, "Did you get the water bill from the mail this week?" I didn't answer right away. I finished the screw I was tightening before I stepped back inside. She stood in the kitchen, holding a stack of flyers, visibly flustered. "The bill isn't here," she said, flipping through again. "I thought you were checking the mail?" "I haven't been," I said simply, and walked to the sink to wash my hands. "You always do." "Not anymore." Her voice sharpened. "Well, someone has to keep up with these things." I dried my hands and leaned against the counter. "You seemed so independent. I figured you had it handled." She blinked at me. "Is this your way of getting back at me? Over one joke?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. "It wasn't a joke, and I'm not getting back at you. I'm living exactly the way you described me." She scoffed, tossed the flyers onto the counter. "This is ridiculous." I didn't answer. Over the next week, her irritation turned to agitation. She forgot another payment, this time for the HOA, and got a late notice in the mail. She left dishes in the sink overnight, something she used to scold me for. The laundry she hadn't touched was now overflowing into the hallway, and I never said a word. She started snapping more. Little things set her off. A missing set of keys, overdone toast, her charger cord that didn't work. And with each new stumble, she looked at me like I was supposed to step in, fix it, restore order. But I didn't move. Tuesday night, she finally said it. "Why are you acting like this?" I looked at her, not angry, just clear. "I'm not acting. I just stopped doing things you clearly didn't value." Her mouth opened, then shut. She turned away, paced the living room once, then back again. "This isn't fair," she said, voice thinner now. I stayed quiet, let the silence settle again. She was realizing what had been holding her up all this time. It wasn't just luck or routine. It was me, behind the scenes, smoothing edges, catching details, keeping things balanced. Now that scaffolding was gone. and she was starting to wobble. The first time I saw her mask slip in public, it was subtle, just a tightness in her jaw when her friend Emily asked why she hadn't made it to the charity planning meeting. "I thought you were co-chairing it?" Emily asked, frowning lightly. "I am," she replied, forced smile in place. "It's just been a crazy week." Emily nodded, polite but unconvinced. She looked at me briefly, as if checking for context. I offered none. That weekend, we attended a friend's engagement party, the kind of social event she usually controlled down to the ribbon colors. But something was different. She was late getting ready, had forgotten the gift, and wore shoes that didn't match the tone of the dress code. Minor details, but not for her. Not for the image she curated so meticulously. And people noticed. Her best friend Lauren asked gently, "You doing okay? You seem kind of swamped lately." She brushed it off with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Work's been a little hectic." But I watched her fingers clench around her glass just slightly tighter. That laugh? I'd heard it before, when she was deflecting, not joking. The questions kept coming in different forms. A colleague of hers at another event asked why the monthly reports had been submitted late, something she usually handled early. Another mentioned she'd missed a conference call. She waved each comment away with vague nods and a string of justifications. But behind her smile, I could see the slow erosion. She was slipping. The life she maintained so flawlessly was showing hairline fractures, and no one was rushing to cover for her. Not me. Not the friends who used to envy her balance. People started to see the frayed edges. They didn't say it out loud, not yet, but it was in their glances, in the way they turned toward me now during conversations, as if reevaluating what they'd assumed about us. And when she snapped at the waiter for getting her drink order wrong, the table went quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around embarrassment like a fog. Later, in the car, she said nothing. Neither did I. But when we got home, she turned to me in the hallway. Her voice was soft, almost tentative. "You could have helped. Just a little. You saw how the night went." I met her gaze steady. "You never asked?" Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Because she knew. I had spent years stepping in before she needed to ask. Years of anticipating, fixing, supporting, without needing recognition. Now she needed support. And no one jumped. Especially not me. It started with lasagna. I came home late from a long meeting and there it was, still warm, perfectly plated, candles lit. She stood in the kitchen with a practiced smile, apron on, glass of wine in hand like it was a scene she'd rehearsed in her head all day. "I thought you'd be hungry," she said, setting the plate down. Her voice was almost gentle. I thanked her, sat, ate in silence. It was good. She hadn't made it in years. The effort was obvious. The warmth, less so. She watched me eat like she was waiting for some line to be crossed. She laughed at something I said during a recap of the meeting, maybe louder than it deserved. The sound stretched awkwardly across the table. She reached out once, brushed my wrist lightly, then pulled back when I didn't respond. The next morning, my coffee was made before I came downstairs. 2 sugars, just how I used to like it. Her mug was already there too, positioned beside mine like it used to be. She was trying to recreate something, a rhythm, a routine, but it wasn't landing. There was no apology in her eyes, no real ownership, just a faint panic beneath the pleasantries. She was testing to see if warmth would draw me back in, if charm could override truth. She started dressing nicer around the house, put on music while she cooked, sat closer to me on the couch, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the presence she wanted to reestablish. Her texts during the day shifted from short updates to longer messages, ending in emojis she hadn't used in months. I replied when appropriate. Polite. Neutral. Detached. It was working, the performance, the pretend normal, but only for her. I watched it with the same clinical distance I'd once used on quarterly reports, measuring results, watching patterns. One night she laughed too hard at a show we both used to love, reached out, touched my arm. Her fingers lingered for a beat too long. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. She studied me then, really looked. Saw the silence behind my eyes, the absence in my presence, and for a moment, I saw it land. The realization that I wasn't withholding affection. I simply didn't feel it anymore. Whatever tether she thought still existed had gone slack. I hadn't closed the door on her. But I wasn't standing inside it either. It came to a head on a rainy Tuesday, just after dinner. The kitchen still smelled of lemon and rosemary, one of her new efforts. The dishes were washed, the lights dimmed. From the outside, it could have looked like peace. But tension hung in the air, thick and waiting. She broke first. "You're punishing me," she said suddenly, sharp and too loud for the quiet room. Her back was to the sink, arms crossed. Her eyes burned, not with anger, but desperation. I stayed seated, wiped my hands on a towel. "I'm not." She took a step closer. "Yes, you are. You've been cold for weeks. You've been detached." I finished for her. Calm. Measured. She flinched slightly. "I said one thing? One joke. And you've been punishing me ever since." I looked at her carefully. No raised voice. No sharp breath. Just the kind of clarity that can only come from pain that's settled in. "You didn't just say it," I said. "You meant it. You meant it enough to say it in front of people who mattered. Enough to laugh like I was some accessory in the room." "That's not true," she said too quickly. "It is," I replied. "And even if it wasn't, you never walked it back." She shook her head, pacing now, hands gripping her elbows. "So what? You stopped caring? You just shut off? That's fair?" "No," I said, rising slowly. "It's not fair. It's honest." She stared at me, breathing shallow. Waiting. I took a step forward, steady. "I'm living exactly how you described me. Useless." I pulled back. I stopped supporting. I became what you said I was. Her eyes filled, not suddenly, but like a tide slowly rising against her will. "That's not. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it like that," I answered. And it stuck. Silence fell again. This time, heavier. Final. She sank into a chair, staring down at her hands. "I didn't think it mattered that much." "It always matters when someone tells you who they think you are," I said. "Especially when they say it while laughing." She didn't have a comeback. No witty deflection. No second performance. Just the small, shaking breath of someone realizing they couldn't undo what they'd already said too many times. I walked out of the kitchen and let the silence settle again. Not as a weapon, but as a decision. Whatever she'd hoped to rebuild, it had cracked beneath the weight of truth, and I had no interest in salvaging something she never thought she'd need to value. I didn't announce it. There were no slammed doors, no dramatic speeches, no late-night confrontations, just a slow, methodical undoing, the same way I'd once held her life together. Now, I was quietly folding mine back into itself. The first things I packed were the things she wouldn't notice. A toolbox from the garage. Winter clothes from the hall closet. I boxed them during lunch breaks, during her grocery runs. I left the shelves looking full enough not to raise questions, for now. I moved deliberately, one drawer at a time, one password at a time. I rerouted my mail, closed the shared account we hadn't used in months, found a short-term lease through a friend from work who owed me a favor. No one knew. No fanfare. Just facts. On the 5th day of my quiet exit, I walked into the bedroom and saw her standing there, holding one of my undershirts. "You're packing," she said flatly. I nodded. "Yes." She didn't cry. Not yet, just blinked slowly, as if trying to catch up to the moment. "For how long?" she asked. I took a breath. "This isn't a break." She sat down on the edge of the bed, gripping the shirt tighter than necessary. "So that's it?" I crouched in front of the suitcase, folding a sweater. "It's not revenge. It's release." There was a long pause. "You could have told me." "I tried," I said, zipping the case. "You just heard what you wanted to hear, and said what you thought wouldn't cost you." She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not broken. Just exposed. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she whispered. I met her eyes. That was the problem. The next morning, I loaded the last of my things into the car before sunrise. The street was still. Air damp from the early mist. No ceremony. No final words. I left a note on the fridge. Handwritten. "Take care of you. I always did." I locked the door behind me, and I drove away. Not angry. Not even numb. Just done. I didn't block her number. I didn't delete her from anything. I just stopped replying. The first call came 2 days after I left. Then a message. Then another. Each one more fragmented than the last. Questions, then concern, then accusation, then apology, then silence. I read them all. Responded to none. 3 weeks later, a mutual friend, Nate, reached out. Said he'd stopped by to check on her after she missed a planning meeting and hadn't returned messages. Said the house looked disordered. She said she's fine, he told me. But the place was a mess. She looked like she hadn't slept. I said nothing. Just listened. The following week, my bank flagged a shared credit card. She'd missed a payment. Small, but telling. She'd never been late before. I cleared my part of the balance, closed the account entirely, quietly, legally. Nate called again. Said she mentioned the car was making a strange sound, that she wasn't sure of who to take it to. I almost offered a mechanic's name, almost, but caught myself. That instinct was part of what got me here. One night, I drove past the house. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something else. The porch light was off, her car parked slightly crooked in the driveway. A trash bin half-tipped on its side near the curb. It looked like a life slowly coming apart, quietly, from the inside out. She messaged again a few days later. Just 3 words, please call me. I didn't. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Not because I didn't feel the weight of her unraveling. But because it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I'd already carried too much of it. I knew what would happen if I answered, the pull, the story, the softened voice, the vague remorse that stopped just short of real accountability. So I stayed silent. I wasn't being cruel. I was being finished. And she was learning, finally, what my presence had truly meant. Not the tasks, not the errands, the architecture of reliability. The quiet support she never saw until it was gone. Now it was gone. And she was starving for it. It was Nate again who brought me the final message. We met for coffee, neutral ground, no agenda. Just 2 men trying to keep pace with the changing landscape. We talked about work, the weather, his upcoming move. Then, toward the end, he set his cup down with a sigh and said, "She asked me to tell you something." I didn't ask him to continue. Just waited. She said she didn't mean it. That night. At the dinner. I nodded once. Looked out the window. The street was quiet. People passing by with no idea of the world that had quietly burned down inside a suburban house. Nate watched me for a moment. "She's not doing well, man." "I know." He waited again, like expecting me to say something about going back, about reaching out, about mending things. I didn't. Because I'd already done my part. And then some. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, felt the warmth hit my chest, then settle. "Maybe I was useless to her," I said quietly. "But I was never useless to myself." That silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled, settled between us.